man? Good.
Hey, there you are.
Hey, sorry, man. Yeah. I think I turned my ringer off or something there. I'm sitting on my bed here with the cat. I work for a brewery, so I'm just like firing off emails. I'm like, oh yeah, it must be coming up soon. And then I'm like, look, I get this email from Mike, like, oh shit, 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Where are you
Well,
at, Tim?
I'm in Ventura,
Oh,
California.
killer. Yeah,
Where are you?
yeah. We
You're on the
played the
East Coast,
Ventura
right?
Theater. Yeah, we played the Ventura Theater with Missing 23rd back in the early 2000s. I was with the Adolescents. That was the only time I think we played that theater. It was awesome. I remember that.
Dude, that fucking theater is amazing. I've been, we try to like help out the community as much as we can, our organization. And
Yeah.
so while the closure of the theater, we've been going over there due to COVID. We've been going over there to help paint and just revamp the whole thing. And it looks so
Wow.
nice right now. It's beautiful.
I remember that. I remember like we knew Steve Soto quite well, and he used to stay at his place actually when we toured down there. And I think he was a big reason why we got on that show. But was it Eddie Numskull, I think, put on that
Yeah,
show?
Eddie. Yep.
And and um, and I remember we did that whole tour with Missing 23rd as well through the States, and that was a real highlight. Like that, I knew the history, and just a little band from Canada playing down in a place like that. It was pretty special.
Oh, you guys you're from Canada, right?
Yeah, from Calgary. Mhm.
Heck yeah, man. That's awesome. Yeah, the whole area, that whole area in Oxnard, the Nardcore scene was very
Mhm.
special, with Ill Repute and Stalag, and I mean, there's just so many amazing bands that came out of there, and they still to
Yeah,
this
for sure.
day are rocking it, man. Dr. No,
That's it's so good. Yeah, I remember we did some stuff with the Mad Caddies up north. Was it the Slow Brewery, I think? And I
Sam,
remember we did, yeah, yeah. And I remember, God, I don't, it's all kind of a blur. This is like 90s, early 2000s time. But yeah, we've definitely put a lot of time in California. And, it's been a long time. It's been over 15 years, I think, since we've been down there. Um, but we are looking to hopefully come down there again soon in 2022 once we kind of get up all this, make up all this Europe stuff that got canned last year.
yeah, oh, and and like if you guys ever come down, keep me, if you guys ever need help or anything getting a gig out there, let me know, man. I book a lot out here.
Do you really? That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
are we recording for the interview right now, or is this
yeah,
just
yeah,
we just riffing?
yeah.
Cool.
No, we're good right now.
Yeah, we got a buddy Brad that is doing some booking for us now because we hadn't really needed a booking agent for a long time, and I used to do all the booking like through Book Your Own Fucking Life and like all the old sort of DIY circuit,
Yeah.
and so Brad, I'm looking forward to like actually working with him and putting a real push to the States again because we are more than overdue.
Um, all right. Well, Belvedere.
Mhm.
Did you? I loved that show, Mr. Belvedere.
Yeah, that's where it was from.
I'm assuming. Do you have a favorite episode that stands out in your
Uh,
mind?
God, I don't know if I do. I mean, I remember Bob Euchre like was sort of the star of that show, and I always loved the Major League movies because he was sort of like I'd watch him, in the show, and then I'd watch him in the movies, and I can't remember, man. It's been so long since I've watched it. I remember like you vague like Wesley the kid getting in shit or something like that, and the butler coming to the rescue, and like this English Mr. Belvedere butler, and yeah, they all kind of all those sitcoms from the 80s kind of really blend together. Hey, the growing pains, and like was he in that episode? Was he in that show? Or like is it all just kind of the same thing wrapped up and split up into different shows? So
Yeah. Well, I wasn't a real Growing Pains fan, but I remember when I was little, I'd watch Mr. Belvedere, and I remember
yeah.
this one episode that really like it sticks with me to this day. It's Kevin was going out with this girl who's a whore, right?
Hmm.
And she just puts out like, I mean, that's what the theme was. So she just puts out on the first date, and they end up really getting along. And then went back to his friends, and he was like, well, I don't know why she's not putting out. Is it, well, because you're nice, everyone's trash to her. And then so he goes on the second date, and he treats her like shit, and she goes, oh, this is what you want. And then I don't know, just for some reason, I was a Catholic kid growing up, and I thought that
Yeah.
really like fucking rang with me. It's like, oh my god, sex.
Yeah, it- yeah, all that shit's a blur. I don't know. The old shows from the 80s, yeah, you kind of like that was kind of what you did. You just kind of sat there and watched TV like on a Friday night or something. And I think
Yeah.
they wrapped it up into like a TGIF sort of thing later on. But before all that, there was definitely a heyday of family sitcoms at that time. And so that's where the name came from. And we were just supposed to be I didn't think we were going to do shit. I think we are just going to be a bunch of kids sitting in the basement trying to play a show here and there. And then so I didn't put a lot of thought into the name. And lo and behold, they came out with a vodka and cigarettes, and every name and every nice view in France and Italy is called a Belvedere. So it's not the most original name. I probably would go back and change it if I could, but after 26 years it's kind of stuck.
I love it, dude. It's amazing. It's an awesome name, and
Thanks.
I, if I had a chance to name a band that, I would. That's all I'm
That's
saying.
cool. Well, and it's kind of a pain in the ass because even though we've been around for so long, there's other bands that have called themselves that, and so we tend to get into these little tiffs on Spotify and stuff when all of a sudden this new song comes up, and I'm like, "Well, that's not us." And then of course, then nobody pays attention, and it's assigned to us, so we have to get it removed. And so it does. You kind of wish that I come up with maybe a 3 or 4 song title or a band name, just so nobody would take it, but whatever.
Well, I mean, you guys were active, and then you guys took a little break. My
Mhm.
first question would be, when taking off, is this always something in the back of your head, or is your heart always calling to it? The music?
As far as being in a band and touring.
Yes.
Yeah, I, you know, so we went pretty hard. We were doing 150, 200 shows a year right up until about 2004, 2005. And it was just too much. And I mean, we were getting good tours. Some were good, like, with bands like Rise Against and Mad Caddies and Bad Religion and stuff. But a lot of the time we were just kind of like going on our own, a lot of basement shows in the States and small shows. And I think just after, we kind of hit our mid to late 20s and everybody had been in a van way too much together, and I never said no to a tour. I just took everything possible, and I think that's been a learning now in my 40s, is to be a little more picky and choosy. But that is ultimately what kind of drove us to splitting up, and then we were apart for 7 years. And I started up This Is a Standoff, and we put up 3 records and did a lot of touring too. It's in my blood. Like it's not for everyone, and but it is something. Touring the world and meeting people and experiencing that is, it's just in me, and I can't kick it.
That's awesome. Um, what is so I listened to the album, and it's
Mhm.
it's awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Um, I have 2 songs that are I would consider my favorite on the album.
Mhm.
And I only have 2 because I couldn't discern what one to tell you was my favorite. But right
Okay.
now, right
Retina, yeah.
now, that was awesome, and Peace in Our Time.
Awesome. That's great. Those
Um,
ones don't get as much love. So I'm glad to hear that.
uh, out of Is there a story that you can tell me about them, or what was in your head when you guys were creating those 2 songs?
It's funny that you said Peace in Our Time, because that's actually the only song I didn't write the lyrics for. Our
Oh
drummer
shit!
Casey wrote those. And it's, but I know where he's going with things, and we discuss this stuff a lot, and it is just this sort of, idea of, I mean, there's a whole theme in the album of being concerned about people that are not well off, and that there's this huge wealth gap, and there's this huge sort of force of the upper class that's sort of doing everything impossible to drain everything from the lower and middle class, and you know take away rights and people. It's been a really big year of things going on while everybody's sort of been in this quarantine. And that's just kind of the feelings that we wanted to tackle. We wanted to talk about. Um, we wanted to really talk about what's going on in the world, and how people are affected and they're not getting what they need.
Yeah, I that right there, the class war is something that's not. It's brought up, but it's not discussed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because
you have a real you have a real polarization, and it's not just it's not just in the States, it's in a lot of places. It's in Canada too. There's this divide, political divide. And boy, we sure do fight each other a lot, but there's just some people that just kind of settle back and just kind of let the action happen, and sort of make the rules that force people to sort of get at it with each other. And yeah,
Yeah.
it is a class war.
And it seems like we prefer to argue with each other about bullshit rather than go after what's really causing it. You have, like you
Yeah.
saying, these people, they create these narratives, or they'll create um, um, they'll stir the pot to try to get us to go at each other, when it's really, my neighbors aren't the people that are doing things to me in
Hmm.
in a big way. It's mostly, or politicians, or people with money moving the politicians, or and
Hmm.
it's
Yeah, it's talking heads on the news too, right? Like
yeah,
who owns them? So it's pretty,
yeah,
people are influenced by what they see, you know. And I understand, when whether it's, a station like Fox or a station like CNN, they just these little, sometimes very apparent persuasions, and sometimes it's a little more subvertive. But you the message is there, and you watch enough of it, and you start picking out other people as the enemy, when really the people that own those stations and the people that are making the laws and the rules that are kind of crushing the majority of us, that's who we should be channeling our anger towards. And that can be a tough thing, when they live in gold castles and behind bars, and
yeah.
what are you going to do, right? So um, yeah,
And
it's
anytime you
definitely a
try
thing.
to have a conversation with people, certain groups of people, it's always, like, when you bring this up to them, it's always the yeah, but,
Hmm.
and it's oh yeah, but this, or no, no, no. And in the moment we can, as a society, learn how to discern the bullshit, I think we'll all be
Hmm.
happier as a society.
Yeah, I agree. I certainly, my band and myself in general, like we sort of have a progressive leaning as far as like our politics. And it's, I mean, I'm very careful about what I say, because we appreciate that our fans come from a wide spectrum of backgrounds and political leanings and stuff. And I'm not in a big fight with people. I don't want to like stir up shit. But I think at the end of the day, I have a lot of empathy for people, and for all people, and I want equality, and I want people to all be okay. And that's really where we kind of come from. I'm not trying to preach to people, and I'm not trying to say this is a way of thinking, but I try to present it in a way that, like, this is a way of thinking of something, and try to take whatever you can from it. And sometimes I'm direct about it, and sometimes I'm a little more vague and aloof, because I want people to sort of interpret it, how they choose to. But it comes from a place of love and empathy, and ultimately I just want people to be taken care of and be okay.
I think that's a beautiful message, to put out there. Has your has it been more difficult for you to write because of that? It seems like the phase of life we're in right now is, anytime someone doesn't like what someone else's opinion is, that they're, we're going to cancel them.
Yeah,
Does it, when you're writing lyrics, is that something you think about?
I've kept it in mind, but I think, this is our sixth record. We have almost 100 songs out. And, maybe when I was 19, we'd write about things like wrestling, or, we always tried to be somewhat socially conscious, but there was some sort of funny things that we would sort of go on about that are just not important to me right now. I have a 5-year-old son. I have a family. I have a lot of friends and family that I want to be okay. I want my kids' generation to have a decent world to inherit. Um, we're not making that easy on them. And so I think it's, in my mid 40s, I don't really have to prove anything. I want to write something that's important, that has value. Um, and so these are the topics I choose to go after for my, my family, for my friends, for myself, for everyone. I just think that at this point, if we're going to go to all this effort to write this record and put a year of our lives into it, I want it to have substance.
That's awesome. Um, I've seen on social media, and I'm not sure exactly how true this is or if this is just propaganda, but um, I could have swore that there's people from the Canadian border signaling for SOS or help, and it might be in regards to the vaccine, not the vaccination, but the shutdown for COVID. Um, do you know specifically what that is or what's going on with that?
No, I don't. I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
Okay,
I
I mean,
mean,
it just
everyone's
might be
everyone's certainly
more
hurting.
bullshit.
You know, certainly people are hurting. Like, you know, people, businesses, whether it be at the border or the rest of Canada, it's people would definitely like to get things going, but at the same time, we got to take care of our physical health here. And yeah, so I don't know specifically what that means, but I'm happy to try and give my, you know, well, I don't want to say I don't really want to comment on something I don't know about, right? I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
often what people do. That's what often what people do is that, you know, you and not everybody's an expert on everything, and everything you read isn't necessarily true. So it'd be tough for me to put an opinion on something that I don't know firsthand about.
okay. Do you have a story that comes from writing the album? You guys together as a group, or something funny or fun that happened while creating the album?
Yeah, this was a bit unusual this time. We're fortunate in that our drummer Casey has a studio, so we're able to sort of set, you know, block out a month, let's say, or 6 weeks, and put time into the record. Our bass player lives in Toronto, and so that's about 4,000, well, 3,000 miles away from us. He was supposed to fly out for his bass parts, and we had a bit of a restriction that came in where it made it really difficult, and we were a little unsure about whether it was going to be okay to even be in the studio together, right? So he ended up doing his bass parts from his apartment through direct input, which was you know, while Casey was doing a Zoom call essentially, and like sort of we're doing the producing and trying to guide him through this. So that was challenging. Yeah, it definitely added a day or two to things, and then he was able to sort of reamp everything in the studio and work from there. But we had to all go in separately, and he has a sort of a main console room and a live room, so I was able to go in there and do my parts and singing, and Dan could do his guitar playing, and obviously Ryan from Toronto did his part. So the only time we were ever in a real studio for an extended amount of time was when Casey and I mixed the record for 10 days, and of course it was like, you know, masks and 15 feet apart and all that. And so it was a bit challenging, but it was definitely the most positive experience I've had as a record, and I just felt like we were all, you know, going in the same direction. So it was okay.
What were you listening to at the moment? You know, that span that you were there creating the album, was there anything specifically that was on your playlist that you were listening to?
I run a booking agency, and so it's called merit based booking, and I book a lot of bands. So you know, there's Adrenalize from Spain, Chaser from just outside your, you know, they're in your guys' area there. I book them for Canada and Europe. Useless ID, The Last Gang. So I have a good list of bands, and there's a band called La Armada from Chicago, who's a hardcore Latino based influenced hardcore punk band, and they're awesome. And I was listening to their stuff. I was listening to an Edmonton band called Wolfric that I manage and book, and they sort of have, it's kind of like metal versus like Willem Scream kind of tunes. Um, but I generally listen to a lot of the bands that I book, which is great. And but I think those two were in particular were pretty heavy and kind of what the doctor ordered at the time.
Do you, when you're creating an album, do you take that into um, consideration, what you're listening to while you are in the middle of, either recording or mastering?
You know, you always kind of go in there with sort of references. So, you know, Casey and I produced the record, and Casey ultimately, you know, mixed and mastered it while I was there. And in the beginning, you sort of take a lot of your influences, you know, like when we were kids growing up with Bad Religion and NoFX and Pennywise, and even some, you know, some bands from the East Coast, Minor Threats and stuff like that. You have an idea, or at least you have a roadmap of what you'd like things to sound like. I feel like now we sort of keep those sort of tones in mind that we kind of like, but ultimately we're trying to make the best Belvedere record. Um, but I won't deny the influences that those bands have had on my, my career over the last 30 years. But I feel like at this point, we really just try to make the best Belvedere record. Um, and I feel like we did a pretty good job of it.
Um, there is no more Warped Tour. Does that
Hmm.
like is that like how do you take that for your genre? Because that's like and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, maybe I'm flawed. um I always looked at, when I was growing up, pop punk and punk were just what I loved. That's what made my heart
Hmm.
go. um
Hmm.
and it seemed like the top of the mountain for that genre is a Warped Tour,
Hmm.
headlining a stage. um
Hmm.
do you feel like when when Kevin announces that we're not doing it no more, is that like, is that heartbreaking, is that discerning, like, as a band, how do you feel?
Well, I mean, we've had some pretty good stints with the Warp Tour, and Kevin was very kind to us back in the late '90s, and he put us on the 2000 and 2001 Warp Tour. And we didn't do the whole thing. We did sort of 3 dates the first year, then we did some stuff in the East Coast the next year, about 8 or 9 dates, and then we did another 2 or 3 years where we were doing like Toronto, Montreal, Boston, or Quebec City or something. So we definitely had a bit of time with the Warp Tour. Um, everything has its time and everything sort of passes. So there's other things that have come up. Once we started touring Europe, I realized that like there's a there's a Warp Tour every week over there. So basically from like April to September, there's some country has some sort of big punk festival. And there's a lot of
Mm.
there's a lot of great um, spirit that you can feel in those festivals. Whether they went to the Warp Tours or whether there was just this sort of between consistency between the sort of festival atmosphere. I feel it in a lot of the places that we go now. Um, it's too bad that it's not, sticking around, but at the same time, like, I can only imagine the work that goes into it. If you were a small band and you weren't on a bus, I know what it was like to go and drive 6 hours overnight, get up at 8 o'clock in the morning, go to production, and they're already up, like, smiling or not smiling, and,
Oh yeah.
drinking their coffee, and hey, we've been up for 2 hours already, and I know how long and grueling those days are. And I can only imagine. I'm a promoter, so I know what it's like to put on shows and how much work goes into it. I can't imagine putting on this rolling festival 40 days, straight, with, like, you know, all the
I had,
logistics of hundreds and thousands of people. So,
I had a fucking
it maybe
stage
just kind
there.
of, what's
So
that?
I had a stage there at Warped Tour in
Which
Ventura.
stage?
No cover
Oh,
stage.
no way.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just that one day of work is so stressful.
Oh man, I
It's
remember we used to
so
do
ridiculous.
we did the Volcom stage a couple of days, and sometimes we would get up with those guys and help build the stage. It was a real, like, community. All the bands would get up, and everybody's making $100, and we're like, fuck yeah, like, out there selling your merch until 10 o'clock at night, and then hop in the van and drive another 6 hours. It was hard work, but it was fun, man. Like, and for us, that really helped us get things going in the States a lot. We met a lot of great people down there at that time. So it was a special time. But I think there'll be other stuff, and there's other festivals popping up here, Punk in the Park in Arizona, and I think it's got another date in November in California. And I think Jim from Pennywise is putting on a beach festival here as well. And so, maybe it's not like the big sort of like national touring thing, but maybe regionally you'll get sort of that same vibe.
Do you have any Fletcher stories? Fletcher from Pennywise?
I do. Um,
Everyone
so,
does. Okay.
well, I tell you, we just toured with Pennywise in South America about 2 years ago, and those guys were great, man. Like, and nothing bad, like, just
Except
big
for
shows,
Fletcher.
great, yeah, like, great dudes and everything. And I do have one story with Fletcher. We were on tour with Strung Out. This wasn't with Belvedere. This was with my other band. This is a Standoff. And I'm not telling anything that, like, is secret, because it's on YouTube. But we were on tour with Strung Out and Death by Stereo, and we played in Anaheim at the what's the one at Disneyland, the House of Blues.
Mhm.
And Fletcher was there hanging out, and we got to chatting a little bit. And he during Strung Out set, he gets up, and there's this, like, he was like a younger kid, 15, 16 or something, maybe, I don't know. He gets him, and he basically, like, windmills him into the crowd, And then Fletcher goes and jumps into the crowd, and you could tell everybody was like all like, "Oh, this is awesome!" until he jumped into the crowd, and then everyone was just like, "Ah!" And he like took out like 10 people. You can see it on the video. If you look it up, it's like Fletcher from the House of Blues that's strung out or something, and he just takes everybody out. But you know, they all kind of got up and holy fuck, and then but it was rad. That was a memorable night just to play that venue and to play with those bands and then to see him, and it was a fun story.
Do you know there are like I want to do this. I have so many clips. I interview people all the time. And
Mhm.
anytime someone's like they mention punk or if they're in a punk band or if they're Warped Tour, they have to have a Fletcher story. And so
Yeah, the
I've
treatments.
I've accumulated hundreds of Fletcher stories. Like from when he punk Kid Rock,
Mhm.
where he made Kevin kick Pennywise off tour. Like there's just so many awesome stories. We even did
Yeah, you know,
like this was our magazine for the last Warped Tour. We did it. We
yeah.
were like a program for him, and that was one of the questions.
Mhm.
Is like, oh, Fletcher stories. Does anybody have Fletcher stories?
Yeah, he's got some good history, that's for sure. I've heard a lot of them too.
He's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
buddy, is there anything else I might have missed that you would like to have mentioned?
I don't think so. Yeah, the new record is out on Thousand Islands Records out of Quebec. They're handling North America, and Lockjaw Records from the UK, and they're handling Europe as well. And the album's called Hindsight is the Sixth Sense. And fuck, we are coming to the States sometime in 2022 later on, but we're coming back. So thanks for being patient with us.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you, um, Steve. You're a great dude, and I enjoy your album. Good luck with
Thank you very
everything.
much, Tim.
Have a good one, bud.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for the interview, bud. Cheers.